Welcome back to Hardball. Scott Walker is seen as a potential contender in the crowded 2016 Republican field for president, but a trove of newly released emails and court documents in a years-old case is causing embarrassment for the Wisconsin governor. In 2012, a former aide to Walker during his time as Milwaukee County executive pled guilty to misconduct in public office. She was charged with mixing political activities with her official duties as an employee of the county, violating Wisconsin's very strict campaign laws. Well, the emails released yesterday show that kind of activity was common in his office. Walker even directed his separate county and campaign staffs to hold a daily conference call to coordinate strategies. Importantly, the investigation is closed and found no wrongdoing on the part of Walker himself. In a statement, the governor's spokesman said, quote, "The recently released communications of a county staffer from several years ago are part of a legal process that was completed early last year. Governor Walker is confident during that legal process these communications were thoroughly reviewed by the authorities." While the political stakes are clear, with the Bridgegate scandal continuing to hobble Chris Christie's national prospects, establishment Republicans have been looking for a 2016 candidate capable of taking on Tea Party forces like Ted Cruz and Rand Paul. Some thought they found that prospect. In fact, I thought they did in Governor Walker. They may still have him there. John Nichols is Washington bureau chief for the Nation magazine. He's been combing through the newly released documents already. And John Hodwin's co-author of Double Down and has been an MSNBC political analyst of great worth. Let me ask you this. I only get the job because I respect your reporting, and I do respect the law, obviously, in every state. I guess for someone like myself who's worked in politics, been around politics for, 40 years now, I am not, what should I say, mortified at the notion that people working for politicians who are running for re-election or running for higher office are deeply involved and engaged in helping them win. You spend every day helping them politically. You help members of Congress get re-elected every day. It's part of the job. Wisconsin's got they've got a big firewall there. You can't do this if you're working for the government of a county or the state. You can't get involved in campaigns. I get it. But politically speaking, is this going to be a dearment impediment, as we say in the Catholic Church, something that will stop him, Governor Scott Walker, from being a credible candidate for president in 2016? What's happened?
I find it sort of hard.
I'm going to go with John first.
I find it sort of hard to believe that this is the kind of thing that this in and of itself, what we currently know, would be a major impediment for Walker for a couple reasons. One of which is, as they say in their statement, the prosecutor investigated this, looked at these emails, and decided that Walker was not guilty of anything, and he was not punished, and they have that as a pretty strong line of defense. But as you said, Chris, I think most people think that David Plouffe, when he was the senior advisor to Barack Obama in 2012, that he was doing the people's business, and he was also deeply involved in the re-election effort. When Chris Matthews worked in the Carter White House,
as a speechwriter,
he
was writing campaign speeches.
You were writing campaign speeches at the same time that you were writing.
But we were going through a very elaborate thing, and John Nichols should listen to this, because to obey the law then, we made a point of taking off a day a week, a certain amount of hours working for the government as presidential speechwriters, a certain amount working as writers for candidate Carter. So we were very deliberate about observing the law.
And of course the President Carter was not making fundraising phone calls from the Oval Office, and there are obviously some bright lines over which if you step, you're in real serious trouble. It doesn't at this moment look to me like Governor Walker has done that. And if that's the case where we are right now, I think this is something that if he handles it well, he can get around.
Okay, let's go to John. So, John, you've been covering this. You know the guy well over all these years. Give us a calibration of how important this is politically first, or maybe legally first, and what that means politically, however you want to do it.
Well, we can go both ways. Let's start with legal. It is true that these revelations, coming from 27,000 pages of emails as well as 400 pages of legal documents, are rooted in a case that played out a year or so ago, several years ago. But it's an ongoing case. This woman is wrangling over her conviction. And there is another investigation going on. And so the notion that everything's settled and every I's been dotted and every T has been crossed is simply not true. Governor Walker has ongoing problems as regards how he has mixed politics and governing. Now, let's go deeper, though, on this core question.
Explain this. Wisconsin is one, as Teddy White said years ago. He used to say if there's a vote, a guy where a woman wins by one vote in Wisconsin or Minnesota, they won by one vote. It's a clean as a whistle state, Wisconsin. So is Minnesota. There aren't that many, but those are two of them. Clean as a whistle. Is it particularly pristine in terms of that firewall, as I call it, between politics and government in your state?
It's pretty pristine. There's no doubt about that, or historically it was. I think it changed a lot over the last 15, 20 years as the politics has become more nationalized. But I would remind both of you that there's another state that has a history of pretty pristine politics. That's Iowa, where they begin the presidential process. And this is the important thing to understand here. We are not talking about a politician and his aides talking about politics, discussing politics. We are talking here about the establishment of a sophisticated infrastructure, a secret email routing system, so that public employees could work at their desks on political projects, so that they could fundraise, so that they could help to run a campaign for lieutenant governor out of a public office. We are also talking about a politician, Scott Walker, who the emails reveal micromanaged serious developments, a crisis at a county mental health center, an infrastructure collapse in which someone was killed, apparently with an eye toward having the best political playout. Now, we know politicians do that. I understand that. But here you saw him not just doing it with his campaign staff, but also a lot of management of the public staff and telling them, let's hold this story back. Let's not cooperate with that Freedom of Information Act request. People around him saying
great
those
reporting.
things.
Let me go to
This is
something
where
that a lot of people are going to be talking about all over the country, not just in Wisconsin where you're covering. Perhaps the most embarrassing emails released yesterday had nothing to do with Walker necessarily. Rather, they were several clearly racist messages either being forwarded or endorsed by staffers of Walker, the governor. One email sent to Walker's deputy chief of staff relays a joke comparing welfare recipients to dogs. Quote, at first the lady at the welfare office said, dogs are not eligible to draw welfare. So I explained to her that my dogs are mixed in color, unemployed, lazy, can't speak English, and have no frigging clue who their daddies are. They expect me to feed them, provide them with housing and medical care, and feel guilty because they are dogs. Well, the punchline, quote, my dogs get their first checks Friday. Well, the staffer responded, quote, that is hilarious and so true. Well, there's another so-called joke email forwarded by Walker's chief of staff at the time. It's about a nightmare, in quotes, in which the unknown author discovers, among other things, he's African-American, Jewish, and gay. At the end of the 5-page email, the author writes, quote, say it isn't so. I can handle being black, disabled, one-armed, drug-addicted, Jewish, homosexual, on a pacemaker, who is HIV positive, bald, orphan, unemployed, lives in a slum, and has a Mexican boyfriend. But please, oh dear God, please don't tell me I'm a Democrat. You know what, John? None of it's funny, and it's so old hat. Like 30, 40 years ago, it'd be bad. Right. Now it's just rancid. Yeah. And they think it's funny. Now that's an indictment that I can share. Yeah. Who are these people that are in public office serving a mixed ethnic community of Milwaukee? A lot of African Americans, a lot of Hispanic people. They're serving under oath, and they're talking about them this way.
It is not.
That's a problem.
That is not a. It's not a pretty picture. And Governor Walker, having those people around him. We've talked a lot. I think these two stories between the New Jersey story with Chris Christie and this story with Scott Walker are dramatically different in terms of their political impact.
Agreed.
But one of the things we talked about with Chris Christie is what's the culture around the governor. Here we have another case that people are going to look at and say, what is the culture around Scott Walker? Who are the kind of people he employs?
You know what I like to do?
What are their attitudes like?
I like to pick up the rock, and everybody watching, white, Spanish, African American, whatever, you pick up the rock. You hear what people talk like when you're not there. Isn't it fascinating? Mm-hmm. John Nichols, thanks for your great reporting, and thank you, John Hammond, as always. Up next.